Good morning to you. There's Jon Mozes, the Altoona Curve, with us this morning. Our visit presented by Marcus & Mack, voted the best law firm, the best personal injury lawyer 4 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. So the other night, we have a choice. We can go to Pittsburgh and watch Paul Skeens pitch against the Rockies. We can go to Altoona. We can watch Jared Jones pitch against the Senators. I'm guessing that the excitement level was pretty high in Toonatown there. Jon, good morning.
My goodness. Great to see Jared again. He threw like 4 pitches in the first inning, and I was like, oh, yeah, there he is.
I remember that guy.
He looked really good.
Well, when you see a guy like that, and it's been a period of years since he's there. What was it, 21, 22 when he last threw there?
He was with us in 2023, 10 starts.
Say it again, 23?
2023, yeah. Made 10 starts.
Yeah, so you get to see him again, and obviously he's a bigger guy, he's a stronger guy, and I'm guessing you saw a little bit of a difference in the approach, huh?
Yeah, I just think, his body has matured a little bit. That can happen, as guys get into this age range. I mean, we are in an era where guys move so much quicker through the minor leagues that, you're seeing younger players at this level than you have, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So, typically guys grow into, we can use our air quotes, call it their man strength, right? When they turn to 22 to 25, 26 years old, somewhere in that range where, your body can really develop and, you've sort of gotten out of your original growth phase. So, now that's the window that Jared Jones is in where, he's been off the mound, so he's had to work at his body in other ways. And, I think physically he looks like he's in a really good spot.
Yeah, I bet. What does the presence of a guy like Jared Jones, and he's going to make his second start now for the Curve coming up on Sunday, what does watching him do for some of the young guys on the Curve pitching staff? Are there one or two guys who actually look at that and would benefit more than maybe some others who've been there a while?
Yeah, several guys over the years have told me about how just watching a major leaguer go about their business can be helpful to them. Seeing how, what they look like when they come into the ballpark each day. What do they do when they first get in? What does their preparation look like? How do they warm up their arm? Is that, is there something to Jared Jones to warm up pregame that maybe I'm missing? That, I can take into my work. What's his demeanor like on the mound? How does he react to, a ball getting dropped in the outfield? Those observational things I think are really important. Baseball players, they spend a lot of time with each other. They talk, they have deep conversations about everything under the sun, but they're observant people. They love to watch what other guys do. You hear about pitchers talk about reading swings of opponents in the batter's box. It's very much an observational sport. So, I think that's sort of where, current Curve pitchers can pick things up is, watching him go through the routines of a start day.
Yeah, and I imagine some of them see that he's so fierce on the mound. He's an absolute beast out there on the pitching mound. That kind of intensity, that has to help too.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that hyper-competitiveness was on display, immediately. I passed through the clubhouse a little after batting practice, probably 4:45 for the 6 o'clock game. And I could just tell that Jared was getting into game mode, right? Like headphones on, not really talking to people. He had just wrapped up his pregame meeting with his catcher and our pitching coaches. And, there was just like a cool silence about him where you could tell he was dialing in. That focus, that competitive fire, you're going to need that. Preston and I were actually talking about this on the broadcast Tuesday night, that, when Jared gets back to the mound, you're talking about, when he gets back to the mound in Pittsburgh, it's going to be maybe the last week of May, first week of June, that kind of thing. You're going to need that competitive energy, that passion to sort of raise the energy level in the clubhouse, because you start to get into that sort of daily routine of, okay, I just got to go, I got to do this, I got to do this. You sort of lose, when you have the day-to-day monotony, you lose some of the passion, some of the energy, right? You only have so much of it. So I think Jared coming into that Pirates clubhouse could be a little bit of a shot in the arm for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
A guy who brings a high level of competitiveness that will, sort of permeate to other guys on the team and sort of keep their energy level at a good place to keep winning.
Is there a young guy on that Curve staff right now that you look at and you say, boy, he reminds me of Jared Jones when he was here?
I don't know that there's a guy that comes to mind immediately in terms of the competitiveness and the fire that he tends to pitch with. That's sort of why Jared Jones is who he is, right? That's what makes him, such an interesting and incredible pitcher, is that he sort of brings a competition level that I think is different from other guys.
Yeah. All right. So the Curve this weekend, already during the course of this week, they've gotten some pretty fine pitching. Yesterday must have been fun to watch, huh?
Yeah. Unfortunate that the Curve ended up splitting the doubleheader yesterday because, you get a start from Christian Curtis that's good enough to win, right? 6 innings, 3 runs, or 6 innings, 2 runs. And then, a run comes across in the top of the 7th, right? And then into the bullpen game, Jake Shirk hasn't had a ton of experience nor success here yet, and yet he threw it really well. Gets you off to a great start in the bullpen game, 3 scoreless innings. Cy Nielsen's been dominant this year. That was really good to see. And Emmanuel Chapman sort of walked the tightrope in the 7th inning there once the Curve got the lead. But that's exactly how you draw it up. Pitching like that yesterday, you hold them to 3 runs and no runs over 14 innings in a day. That's a really good day for the pitchers,
Yeah, absolutely. There have been a few guys come up from Greensboro here in the last couple of weeks, too, that are getting their first taste of Double-A ball, and they're having some success. You must be pretty impressed.
Yeah, gosh, it seems like every day we're getting a new Greensboro grasshopper. There's been a few injuries here, right? Will Taylor just went on the injured list. Curve lost 2 starters in Chesapeake last week, so Matt Ager came up here to work as the piggyback. Ager was very good on Tuesday, and I would expect Matt to sort of work in that piggyback role again on Sunday behind Jared Jones. Ager was a 7th-round draft pick, so, the Pirates see some real ability there. He's got to work on commanding his fastball a little bit better, but really impressive debut, 4 scoreless behind Jared Jones on Tuesday. And, getting to know some of the other new guys that have arrived, like Ivan Brettauer, who made his Double-A debut yesterday. Samuel Escudero has shown up here as Altoona's 3rd catcher for a couple days. Losing a couple of guys to AAA and then a couple more to injury has been really challenging for this team to navigate.
Yeah, it has been. Keiner Delgado continues to impress us, though. Keiner Delgado's having a season.
No doubt about it, man. I think that's a guy who has really shown a good feel for the barrel. I was talking to our hitting coach, Scott Siebel, last week, who's originally from McKeesport. And Scott was talking about with Keiner that when he arrived, they identified a couple of holes together. They sort of anticipated what Double-A pitchers would start to do to him. And to Delgado's credit, he has closed up those holes, made the adjustments so that he can get to those pitches a little bit more often. And he's hitting the ball with authority, switch hitter, can play 2nd and 3rd. It's been a really nice start to the year for Keiner Delgado. And, the Curve have really needed his production at the top of the order.
Could you say the same thing about Deuce Gorson?
It's interesting with Deuce. I think his timing is off a little bit. I've seen him just sort of swing through a couple pitches in the strike zone that's made me say to myself, wow, that's weird. What's going on? It's been a little bit of an odd start for Deuce. I think, there's a difference between being at the top of the scouting report and being a little bit further down, right? Mm-hmm. You remember when Deuce got here last year, you had Nick Samillo and Sramar Johnston, eventually Esmerlin Valdez and Connor Griffin and Omar Alfonso hitting around him with Mitch Jebb. I think he sort of flew under the radar a little bit last year, and maybe pitchers weren't as focused on how to get him out. And he was able to take advantage of that. This year it's different, right? He's hitting 2nd and 3rd. So I think there's some of that going on where pitchers are much more attentive to how to get him out. And I just think pitchers have sort of executed against him. I don't think it's anything about, Deuce not putting the work in or not being prepared or making an adjustment himself. I think it's just a little bit more about pitchers have pitched really well against him. And, eventually the pendulum should swing in the other direction.
Yeah. And that's all part of the growing up process, which happens in Double-A baseball. All right, let's talk about this weekend. Still got some baseball to play, and then another week at home. Is that right?
That's right. Our first engagement with the Erie Seawolves coming up, Detroit Tigers affiliate. It's our military appreciation weekend in Curve, PA. We'll have ceremonies throughout the weekend. We'll have post-game fireworks tonight and Sunday night. Great chance to come out and see some early season fireworks here. I think the weather's warming up a little bit. I got it as 64 degrees right now in Altoona. We're loving that. T-shirt giveaway on Saturday, 6:00 games throughout the weekend.
Yeah. So good things happening there with the Altoona Curve happening this weekend. All right, so there you go. He's Jon Mozes, the Altoona Curve, getting ready for another big weekend, and then the Erie Seawolves. It's a good time to be watching some Curve baseball. Hey, Jon, thanks for the visit today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. Talk to you soon.
Jon Mozes and the Altoona Curve. It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com.